Greetings, brothers and sisters of the Discalced Carmelite Secular Order, and anyone else who's interested in the spirituality of Carmel and spirituality of lay people for Carmel. As you know, if you've been following these videos, this is video number 51, I think. We've been talking about the identity and the spirituality of the secular order, the branch of the order that is open to lay persons living in the world. That's where the word secular comes from where you practice your spirituality. I practice my spirituality in a monastery, the nuns in a monastery. We live the common life. Our communities all live primarily the common life. There's a difference between community life and common life. Common life for religious is that nothing is our own. Everything is shared. Everything is held in common. You live in community. The secular order members form communities. The way that it's somewhat similar to the way parishes form community. Each person's in his or her own house in the parish, but there's a community of the parish, and so we have this. Especially is based on the spirituality of Saint John Paul II, who developed in his pastoral documents, developed the concept of communion. He accented the necessity of communion. Community is therefore the chosen word for your organization on an organization level. My community life is different than your community life. There's the same basic principles float around. The same basic principles are present, but in a different way, because I am also called to live the common life. So, now this is going to be important as we come to paragraph number 15 in the Constitutions, when we talk about the spirit, the promise to live the spirit of the it's paragraph 16, pardon me. The commitment to the promise to live the spirit of the Beatitudes. Poverty, chastity, obedience, we all share. And your basic commitment is interiorly, that interior poverty, chastity, and obedience that we must develop as part of our emotional, psychological, spiritual maturing. The maturity that's demanded by the evangelical councils. We placed the Beatitudes in 1974 in the Rule of Life. The Beatitudes were introduced as what is specifically part of your commitment to the order. You bring your secularitas, you bring your secularity to the order. The mendicant orders are the only ones that can have third orders, as they used to call it, or secular orders. The mendicant orders, Franciscans, Augustinians, Dominicans, Carmelites. The monastic orders have oblates, but we have lay persons who are part of our order. As those of you who are my age and around my age, remember, it was first, second, third order. It was the first order was the friars, the second order were the nuns, and the third order were the seculars. And it's funny, it's a funny denomination or way of calling it, because the secular order is actually the largest presence of the world, in the world. The largest presence in the world of Carmelites is seculars. And then the nuns. And then the friars. The friars are in third place in terms of number and presence. But we're called first, second, and third. We don't use those terms anymore because we share the same call to holiness in the same way, in the way of Teresa of Jesus and John of the Cross. And we contribute to the world through apostolic activity, which is part of our vocation, even if that apostolic activity is hidden, as in the case of the nuns. The nuns have an apostolic activity. Their prayer is apostolic. Their lifestyle is apostolic, even if cloistered. And the seculars, their Carmelite identity also is apostolic. And it is apostolic based on the call to live the spirit of the Beatitudes. In, I think it was July of 2004, if I remember correctly, I went to Boston, Massachusetts for a conference, a couple of days of meetings for the secular order. And at that conference, I gave a talk on the Beatitudes as part of your identity and part of your commitment. And it's in this little book. It's probably coming up backwards on your screen. But this little book, Welcome to the Secular Order of the Discalced Carmelites. The first 25 or 30 videos that we made we were going through some sections of this book. But beginning on page 63 of this book, which is also available on Amazon.com, in the beginning of this book, on page 63 of this book, begins the Beatitudes and your vocation to Carmel. It was a talk that I gave, and it's written. It was a transcript of a talk, so its language is sometimes a little confused because I was speaking and someone was transcribing, and they just printed it without correcting some grammar mistakes and things like that. But anyway, the Beatitudes are specifically placed in your constitutions, and they're placed in your promise to live the spirit of the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes, there's two sets of Beatitudes. In St. Luke's Gospel, there's a shorter version. St. Matthew's Gospel has a full version. And St. Matthew's Gospel, it's right at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7 of St. Matthew's Gospel, the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus presenting to the church, to believers, how to live. And so the Beatitudes introduce the Sermon on the Mount. So as an introduction for understanding, for putting meat on and reflecting and putting identity to the Beatitudes, we have to read through the different parts of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is like a compendium of how to live in relationship to God, who's our Father. But let's read paragraph 16 of the Constitutions. The Beatitudes are a plan of action for life and a way to enter into relationship with the world, neighbors and co-workers, families and friends. By promising to live the Beatitudes in daily life, secular Carmelites seek to give evangelical witness as members of the church and the order, and by this witness, invite the world to follow Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. John 14:6. We have a lot of, when I first came into the office of the Delegate General for the Secular Order, there was a lot of discussions about apostolate, and people were afraid of the word apostolate. So I tended, as you know from the 6 M's that we talked about in the beginning of this series of tapes, in the 6 M's, I preferred the word mission. You have a mission. You have a mission, you secular members of this order that we all belong to. You have a mission. And it's to testify, to witness by the way you live your life. That's your fundamental mission. You who have families, which is all of us who come from a family, or most of you have made a family, created a family. Your fundamental mission is in your family. Second to that would be in your workplace, by living according to the Beatitudes, according to the spirit of the Beatitudes. This way of life that you are committing yourselves to, chastity, poverty, obedience, as the way of understanding the person of Jesus, who was chaste, poor, and obedient, to understand how to live, and then to put that in terms of relationship. The Beatitudes introduce us to how are our relationships affected by our commitment to the order. Relationships in the community. This is the first place, because you're entering into the community and you're entering into relationship with the people who form the community. These people who are in your community become your significant others in terms of spirituality, in terms of the spiritual life. You might have a spiritual director who's not a member of the secular order, or you might have some people that you're very friendly with. But I know my own experience. I can talk to my brothers in community about things that I could never talk to my brothers in my family. I love my brothers, my sister. I love them, but there's a certain way that I can talk with other Carmelites that I can't talk with members of my family. Even despite the fact that I love them very much. I miss them terribly. But the vocation calls us into relationships on a spiritual level. The vocation to become part of the order. And so the first place where we live this commitment to the Beatitudes is in our community. The second place is in the family. The first place is not first place in priority, it's first place in point of fact. You learn through the community how to live the spirit of the Beatitudes. So that's the first place where you learn it. The first place where you practice it is in your families. The witness that you give. Especially now, many people experience what would never be thought of 50 years ago. Children who just stopped practicing the faith. Your witness is still very important, and you may not be able to see its effects, but the effects will be there in time. Think of Saint Monica and Saint Augustine, and how she prayed him into converting and changing his lifestyle. So family is the priority place for your witness. Learning from the community how to be a witness in your family. Then how to be a witness in your family transfers into how to be a witness in your neighborhood. How to be a witness in the way that you conduct your relationships with your neighbors. In the way you conduct your relationship with the institutions that you're involved in. If you have work. I've known many, especially men, who became members of the secular order, who understood that they had to do their work a little bit differently than they might have done before they became secular order members. It's the Beatitudes. The place of justice, the Beatitudes. The fourth and the eighth Beatitudes talk about justice. And the world is sorely in need, is very much in need of our example in the way that we live, the way that we live and the way that we do things. So I would recommend that if you have the opportunity, you can get this book. As I said before, for those of you who do not have it, you can get it on Amazon. You can buy it either by the book, or you can get it as a Kindle copy. But to reflect on what is written in there, in the page 63 onward, about the Beatitudes as part of your commitment. So we've done, now this is number 16. We did 13, 14, 15, and 16 on the promise and the content of the promise. And they go together. Again, going back to the text of the Constitutions, by promising to live the Beatitudes in daily life, secular Carmelites seek to give evangelical witness as members of the church and the order, and by this witness invite the world to follow Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. So this is where the concept of mission comes in. What is your mission? Your mission is to live the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Blessed is the world, because we are present in the world to be able to give the example. And maybe example that's not understood initially. But good example is the primary witness. So meditate, read, especially the Beatitudes, but read the Sermon on the Mount and examine yourself according to what you find in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is wonderful in teaching. He was wonderful in showing how he lived. We want to live how he lived. And you're making a promise and you're making a commitment above and beyond. The Beatitudes are for the whole Catholic Church, as poverty, chastity, and obedience are the evangelical counsels for the whole Christian world. The poor, chaste, and obedient Christ, who is the Savior for the whole world. But you make a specific promise to put the Beatitudes into practice visibly as witness. Witness is not invisible. You cannot witness to something invisibly. We're not show-offs, but we show. We have to show. We wear the scapular. I wear the religious scapular, the scapular for religious. You wear the scapular. In your ceremonies, you wear the scapular. A cloth, a little cloth scapular. I also have a little one on myself. But so we wear that as an external sign of our witnessing. But the real witness comes in action, in acting. And the guide for acting is found in the Beatitudes. What am I supposed to do? Look at the Beatitudes. Read them often. Meditate on them. I'll meditate on them frequently. We're not left without an indication of what God wants for us. We don't have to guess. It's made very clear. And what we've tried to do in the Constitutions is put them down simply in each of the numbers of the Constitutions. Not to make burdensome rules or demands. Sure, some people are freer than other people, and those who are freer than other people are able to do certain things, and those who are not free are not able to do those things. But all of us witness together. We especially in the bonds that you form with your brothers and sisters in the community. The Beatitudes are your way of living. Thank you very much. And this book, as I've pointed out, this book on the Welcome to the Secular Order of the Discourse of the of Discalced Carmelites is available through Amazon.com. And you can get a Kindle version if you can't get the copy of the book itself. And then also on Amazon.com, there are my books on reflections of St. Teresa and St. John of the Cross. Thank you to those who have sent me little messages about the value that they find in those reflections. It's encouraging. And it's also a source of income for our mission in Indonesia. So God bless you, and remember to subscribe to this video, OCD for OCDS, and to push the alert button. And any comments that you have to make, I'm glad to read them. Sometimes I have difficulty finding. I get a copy on the email that somebody has sent a message on the website on the YouTube, and then I can't find it on the YouTube to answer. So sometimes I get a little bit confused. But thank you very much, and God bless you all.